Well, thank you, Jerry. Hello, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm really happy to be here. For the chat, at one point, I'm going to ask you a question and to put a word in the chat. So maybe if you can wait for that. And at the end, of course, you can put your questions in there like people have been doing from previous sessions. So I'm going to talk about psychological safety. That's quite a buzzword. I'm sure you've heard it, psychological, the whole psychology, this thing about being safe. It's a term that was coined way back in the 90s by a psychologist called William Kahn. And then Amy Edmondson, a Harvard scholar, did a lot of research with psychological safety related to team performance and business impact. But today my presentation is inspired, by my stories, by what I've learned, and also by a book I've just read from Timothy Clark. He's a social scientist in the States. Psychological safety, maybe it's, I feel a concept, or I understand a concept and I don't have words for it, and I don't have maybe the structure for it. So what I'm presenting today is I'm going a little bit further about psychological safety and how it's connected to sociocracy. And I'm going to put a little bit of structure to it using Timothy Clark's 4 steps. So of course, I'm going to show you some pictures. Sociocracy, the psychological safety and its 4 steps. So I'm going to make an explicit connection between the two. We're going to look at sociocracy in the workplace. I'm going to use the term, the Sociocratic Circle Method, because it's, for me, it explains even more explicitly exactly what I'm talking about. It's the method, it's the consent, the circle, the double linking. So the method of it, and the 4 stages of psychological safety. But for me to understand something, I need to compare. So we're going to look at what a toxic environment is. That's the opposite of an environment where you would feel and you would have psychological safety. So there are some words, micromanaging, disengaged, overworked, underpaid. This is when I'll ask you to go in the chat if you want and just think of one word. Have you had the experience of being in a toxic environment before? And what's one word that comes to play? So you've got your word, you've got those words there in front of you. I'm going to tell a story. So imagine you're a little fly on the wall, and you're watching a marketing team of about 6 people, and it's their weekly meeting, and they're sitting around the boardroom table. Now, of course, there's a facilitator. His name's Barry. He opens the meeting by saying, "Okay, people, let's cut to the chase. We're all busy here. As you know, we need to be proactive and very edgy to keep our product ranking to at least the top 5. So anybody got any ideas for this first item on the agenda?" He looks around, and Rebecca has done a lot of research, and she has a genius idea to present. Well, she thinks. She lifts up her hand and says, "Well, I'd like us to consider using the XYZ social media approach, and from the results I've seen, I believe it will make a positive diff." Jack cuts her off in a very condescending tone, and he says, "Really, Rebecca? Another flavor of the month? That's a waste of our time." Another team member, Jacqueline, rolls her eyes and chimes in and says, "Here we go again." The rest of the team is silent. The facilitator clears his throat and says, Rebecca, this doesn't look like the right time to bring this up. Let's go to the next agenda item." Well, how does Rebecca respond? She shuts down completely. She sits back and thinks, that's the last time I bring any idea up on this team. So now we're going to change scenario. Psychological safety. There's sunshine, and you know it feels pretty safe in that picture, doesn't it? So here's the same scenario, but this time we're going to color it with psychological safety. Barry opens the meeting again. He says, "Hey, welcome everyone. Let's do a check-in before we dive into our agenda." Everyone takes a turn, brings up what's alive in them in the moment. And once the administrative part of the agenda is over, Barry, the facilitator, says, "Okay, our first item is about product ranking. Now, before we go into picture forming, is there anyone here that would have a proposal maybe to submit?" Now, Rebecca has done a lot of research and she has a genius idea to present to the team. So she pipes up and says, "I'd like to propose using the XYZ social media approach. From the results I've seen, I believe it'll make a positive difference for a company." In response to Rebecca's proposal, the facilitator says, "Well, thank you, Rebecca. Let's start with a round of clarifying questions on this proposal. Jack, can you start?" Well, Jack asks the first clarifying question. "Does this proposal include a trial period?" Then Jacqueline says, "Well, it looks clear to me, no questions," and the round continues and clarifying questions are answered. Then the facilitator invites people to a reaction round. And when it comes to Jack's turn, he says, "Well, I'm really curious to see how we can adapt this social media strategy for a company." And Jacqueline says, "It sounds pretty daring, but we won't know unless we try." And the rest of the team voice their reactions, each one in turn in the round. There's no crosstalk. The facilitator always includes himself in the round. And the process continues until a round of objections. And no one raises any until it's Sam's turn. He says, "I have an objection. I want to be sure that our budget will be respected. I don't see that in the proposal." Now, since the proposal belongs to the team, it's no longer Rebecca's proposal. Together, they come up with a phrase that addresses a cap on the expenditure. And then another round of objections for the modified proposal. Consent. There's no objections. So you see how the Sociocratic Circle Method that I have just described plays a distinct role in fostering psychological safety. In this second scenario, Rebecca feels that her voice matters. She felt safe bringing the idea without the specter of being ridiculed or shunned. And she's encouraged to contribute. Everyone's encouraged to contribute ideas and give feedback. So, as you know, the Sociocratic Circle Method is used by many organizations, and it can explicitly or implicitly create psychological safety within a team. In a round, each person on the team gets an opportunity to speak up in turn without interruptions, crosstalk. And the result is that people listen to each other's ideas rather than to figure out how they can prove their position is right and someone else's position is wrong. With the Sociocratic Circle Method, consent decision-making is clearly defined with rounds of clarification, quick reactions, and objections in that order. So a culture shift implicitly happens with the integration of equivalence, effectiveness, and transparency, which are the main sociocratic values. So imagine, objections are seen as valuable feedback used to improve a proposal. And because there is psychological safety, no one, including the initiator of the proposal, feels devalued or threatened by objections. So you can think of psychological safety as creating a safe space, a safe bubble, where team members feel confident that no one on the team will embarrass or punish them, or, even if I admit a mistake, no one is going to point their fingers at me or laugh at me behind my back. Psychological safety helps individuals feel safe enough to broaden their minds and explore new ways of looking at the world at their own pace and style. And this feeling of safety fosters positive mental health and well-being for each team member. And today, more than ever, we know the important role positive mental health plays on how we deal with stress, how we relate to others, and the decisions we make in our daily lives. And this includes our work environment. In a toxic or apathetic work environment, team members will lack engagement, often resulting in less than optimal decisions for the organizations. In fact, people will withdraw, choosing to withhold their best self for fear of making a mistake or being seen as incompetent. And that's what we saw in that first scenario, where Rebecca took a risk in sharing a proposal was shut down by Jack and Jacqueline quite overtly. And the rest of the team didn't speak up, and the facilitator did nothing to encourage a positive decision. He simply went to the next agenda item. What a missed opportunity for innovation and engagement. Now, I just want to mention this picture here. My grandson, my 14-year-old grandson, was commissioned by me to draw. I said, draw me a picture of people, you know, that are safe in a bubble and there's toxicity around them. And that's what he came up with. So that's a 14-year-old vision of a bubble of psychological safety. So let's take a closer look at the 4 levels of psychological safety as described by Timothy Clark. And here's an illustration by Leander Kretzheim from Brisbane, Australia. So you see, the 4 stages are very simple, and they speak, whoops, sorry. What am I doing? They speak for themselves. So level 1 is inclusion. Now here you can read, I feel safe to share my different skills, strengths, and ways of thinking without feeling like an outsider or that I don't fit in. That's level 1. Level 2, and these are cumulative, by the way. You can't jump to the 4th level without having gone through all these different stages. So level 2, I feel safe. I can't read it, so I don't feel safe right now. I feel safe and I don't know everything without feeling like others think I'm ignorant. So I'm learning. Level 2 is giving yourself the space to learn. Level 3 is contributor. I feel safe to use the learnings and make suggestions and provide feedback without feeling like I'm being critical. And level 4, the last stage, the challenger stage, I feel safe, even expected to challenge the status quo and think creatively without people thinking I'm negative or an upstart. I had to look up that word, upstart. It means nouveau riche, somebody that came all of a sudden has is in a new place in life. So the 4 stages are cumulative, and ideally, an organization would consciously think about, where are we in our psychological safety? Is our inclusion, across the board? Are we learning? Are people contributing? Are people feeling safe enough to challenge the status quo? So we're all human and not quite perfect. So in all this, just remind yourself, it's good to bring resilience and flexibility in the development of your team for psychological safety. So let's look at the psychological safety and the hierarchy of needs. Now, in his book, Timothy Clark explains that the hierarchy of needs, and that in the hierarchy of needs, the famous Abraham Maslow's research on human needs, where psychological safety fits is, of course, after physical needs. We need, once physical needs are looked after, we can start looking at psychological safety, and it straddles security, belonging, and fulfillment. So because the world is what it is, Many of us have experienced a lack of psychological safety at some time in our life, and showing up, it can be showing up as a feeling of embarrassment, humiliation in a social setting. I remember a long time ago when I was in high school, my last year in high school, during algebra class, the teacher had a strict rule: no gum chewing in class. Of course, everybody chewed gum. So the teacher chose to make an example of me and told me to go outside, walk over to the baseball diamond, and place my chewing gum on the backstop post. Now, that would have been a nice break to go outside, except it was winter time and the baseball field was covered with snow up to my knees. Took me a while and I did it. Needless to say, nobody ever chewed gum in Mr. K's class the rest of the year. And you could say it was my grade 12 legacy. So even though I have since let go of that feeling of embarrassment, and I just like to tell the story of how a person can make, in that particular class, remove psychological safety completely. I hear some noise background there, Jerry.
Fine. Yeah.
Sorry. So, that is one way to remove psychological safety, to embarrass someone and to put him in a place or on the spot. So, of course, did that influence my behavior? Well, yeah, I didn't dare chew gum in front of him anymore. But think about, if ever you've been in a position like that, where it does influence your behavior. And those are not neutral events. They can lead to feelings of alienation and even activate a pain center in your brain. It can crush your confidence and leave you resentful. So clearly, how we feel influences what we think we do. Not given a voice and being mistreated can have a profound impact on our ability to perform, to create value, and to thrive. You may have heard of Google's Project Aristotle. It's well researched and documented, and it shows that it's not money and it's not IQ that produces results. In fact, what produces result is psychological safety. It's the most important factor in high performance. So, psychological safety is not a binary proposition. It's not something you either have or don't. It's something that you're in a process of. And again, I bring you back to the 4 stages of psychological safety. But one other thing you have to remember, and on this slide, I show a matrix, the respect going vertical and the permission going horizontal. And the thing to remember is that if you have a serious deficiency in respect, if respect is very low, it pushes the team in and you see their paternalism. And if you have a serious deficiency in permission, then you can fall in the trap of exploitation. I'll explain that. Well, paternalism, that can be good. I mean, paternalism, it comes from the father, it comes from the parent. And sometimes it's necessary to protect someone who needs protection. However, misguided paternalism is when we grant some respect, but withhold power. So we're, the power is taken away. So it runs the risk of creating that dependency and feeling of helplessness and even frustration. I've seen paternalism in the sector that I know well, that I used to work in a post-secondary education sector. It's it's an institution that can be very paternalistic, and we know what's good for you, and this is what you're going to do. So the opposite of that is an organization that is more agile and alert, and that cultivate, bravery and vulnerability. Exploitation, just to touch on that, well, that's the That's the urge to control others to gain for yourself. Here I'm thinking about immoral exploitation, being unkind, non-civil, abusing. Unfortunately, we can be conditioned to accept exploitation, which leads to normalization of abuse. Yeah, sometimes people learn to accept exploitation without complaining, and they even become defenders of exploitation. So you see that in work environment where people accept the boss's behavior, they're being exploited, and they'll even make excuses for their bosses. They'll say, oh, well, it's so complex. He probably needs a holiday. My poor boss is under stress. Yeah, well, unfortunately, we can be blind to that. So all that to say, the factors of respect and permission play an integral part in the level of psychological safety, and how it fits in, how you can keep moving forward in the process of being conscious of it in your organization. So let's look again, maybe with some examples about feelings of about the different stages and how they tie into the Sociocratic Circle Method. So I really believe that the Sociocratic Circle Method is that container to grow and cultivate psychological safety. So inclusion is at the base. It is basic. And inclusion is something you learn by practicing. They say that children will include very naturally. When we get to high adulthood, well, we can start unnaturally excluding. I'll tell you a story. When I was 10 years old, my family moved out west to Western Canada from Quebec. Now, what a cultural shock. I was leaving a French-speaking province to live in an English majority environment. What helped me feel included was the way most of the kids at the school, my new school, took the time to get to know me, took the time to show me how to play their games, took the time to make sign language to explain to me what was going on. It wasn't all rosy, and I did my share of crying, but at the same time, I felt that inclusion, and I felt held by most of the kids. It made a difference in making me feel safe. Now, fast forward to today, I'm an adult, and I just want to put it in a different context that maybe you don't think about too often. I'm a marriage commissioner appointed by the province. So I have a privilege to officiate civil marriages. Each one is diverse and unique. What is common for all these marriages is the fact that the relationship between the two spouses, the partners, is based on consent to receive the other. Consent to receive the other. So if one spouse denies membership to the other, this marriage doesn't function. They may be legally married, but their union no longer exists. So at any moment, one spouse may withdraw that inclusion safety from the other. And it's a daily choice. And we should never take it for granted. And I can speak for that, for having been married 45 years to the same person. Inclusion safety is dynamic and perishable. Respect must be translated into acts of kindness and service, and respect for the other's humanity. Permission is given for equivalent power and participation rights. So that's inclusion safety. Now, let's look at learner safety. Feeling safe to ask questions, lift up your hand and know that you're not gonna, be felt like you're ignorant. It's recognized that learning is more than event-based. Learning is a continuous flow of experience. It's a continuous growth. Every morning when you wake up, you can think, hey, what am I going to learn today? And be open to that. The Sociocratic Circle Method, again, holds the space for learner safety in a very elegant way. Now, building on the inclusion safety, one can feel safe to ask questions and admit they don't know everything. Now, In the Sociocratic Circle Method, development of the individual is integrated in the way performance role reviews are made, focusing on lessons learned and innovating new practices, always supported by the members of the circle. My latest experience with learner safety comes with the Sociocracy Consulting Group, where I've been encouraged to span my wings and consenting to various roles in the organization. And I feel safe because I can count on feedback from my peers to help me in this learning journey. I've even felt safe enough to take on the role of the operational leader of the organization, knowing that everyone has my back. There's a social exchange here. I'm encouraged to learn in exchange for my engagement in the learning process. That's learner safety. It's active, it's alive. Now, look at the time. Contributor safety. The whole systems approach of the Sociocratic Circle Method includes collaboration, and that results in everybody having the opportunity to contribute and get engaged. So in contributor safety, it says here, I feel safe to use my learnings to make suggestions in my team and provide feedback without feeling like I'm intrusive or critical. Now remember, psychological safety builds in a cumulative fashion. So that means that the presence of inclusion safety and of learner safety ensures everyone has a voice and now invites people to contribute intellectually and emotionally. That's what contributor safety is. By its nature, the Sociocratic Circle Method creates a truly collaborative environment. Double linking between different circles ensures two-way communications and dialogue to help make better decisions. Inviting team members to contribute in a collaborative manner does not mean that everyone is always in agreement with one another. That's not realistic and kind of boring, actually. Constructive dissent can lead to unique solutions, what we call out of the box. And team members stay engaged, feel safe, and provide feedback without feeling intrusive or critical. There are many things that can contribute that can cultivate contributor safety. I'm thinking of the Sociocratic Circle Method, which aligns domains, areas of decision-making with the appropriate team. For example, the promotion of products and services in the Sociocracy Consulting Group is the responsibility or the domain of the marketing circle. And I'm a member of that marketing circle, so I feel safe to contribute my ideas, even if they're way out in left field. I feel safe receiving feedback. And if you think of the learner safety, I'm learning about it, so now I can bring my ideas. And as you know, one idea builds on another. So it's amazing how contributor safety how it can enrich a discussion. Now, challenges safety. That's the last stage of psychological safety. It can only be reached if you have the building blocks of inclusion, learner, and contributor safety in place. Let me share you a quote by Martin Luther King. Every society has its protectors of status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. Today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. End of quote. I always take a breath after reading that citation because it really, really comes and gets me. It reminds me of my accountability to the world and to reach my best self always. So what is challenger safety on the team? It's about generating and then harnessing diverse perspectives and even disagreements without emotional escalation, without, losing your cool. It's about it's about having space to hold each other in our vulnerability. It's about taking risk, knowing that I won't be thrown under the bus. The Sociocratic Circle Method is conceived in such a way to provide what Timothy Clark calls candor for cover. Candor for cover. So that means in the Sociocratic Circle Method, we protect each person's right to speak candidly about any topic, provided that, and we provide, and it's understood that no one makes personal attacks or with, has malicious intent. And because people on the team feel protected in that right, they can feel protected enough to exercise their right to candor. So candor for cover. Respect, remember respect and permission, that matrix I showed you? So respect in the fourth stage of psychological safety is respect for the individual's ability to innovate. It's an earned right to challenge the status quo. It's, it's based on your track record performance. You just don't come into a room and start challenging. There's a process. And permission in that stage gives the individual permission to challenge the status quo in good faith. So again, it's in good faith, you've got pure motives, and you're there to improve things, not just to make things, to create chaos. Although there's nothing wrong with chaos. There's nothing wrong with chaos. It's the way the team will hold it and how it's brought about. And everybody can have a story about that, how it's turned out well at the end. In challenger safety, whether you're high up, if you're in a hierarchy and there's psychological safety, you honor each person's offering regardless of where they situate themselves in the hierarchy. We make it safe for people to criticize and challenge the status quo. Challenger safety actually reduces the trap of groupthink. So for challenger safety to thrive, it's best to have what I call a culturally flat organization. It doesn't have to be, structurally flat. I'll give you an example. About 10 years ago, I was working at the University of Regina in a 5 minutes, okay, in a department called the Institut Français. And we had implemented the Sociocratic Circle Method, so it made the department culturally flat. It was a great place to spend 8 hours per day. It was fun, engaging, challenging, all at the same time. That was because psychological safety was fully present in all its 4 stages. And the structural hierarchy was still present. The director was still accountable to the vice president, the managers reported to the director, etc. The culturally flat department allowed policy decisions to be made directly by the people that work in those particular areas of responsibilities, particular domains, whether I was a manager of student services. So my team made policies affecting our work for with student services. We had a general circle, and that was, we saw the double linking at play in the general circle. So I remember thinking, this was, like I said, such a great place to work. Psychological safety was there. Today, the Institut Français was morphed. I mean, you know how things go. There was an amalgamation. The director left the organization. I even left and joined the Sociocracy consulting group. So, but if that was still there, psychological safety, the story would be different today. So, thank you all. This is my team, Sociocratic Consulting Group, Sociocracy Consulting Group, and psychological safety is my passion. I'm so glad I've got a word or a concept to what I've been feeling all this time, what is needed in on our teams. What I've learned so far is a gift, and I hope you enjoyed connecting the dots with me between psychological safety and the Sociocratic Circle Method.